Unit 2 of Forensic Science. Yes, we are already moving on forth, and yeah, I'm wearing a Snuggie. Don't dog on the Snuggie, okay? It's freezing right now. I don't know what time you're watching this, or if this is in the summer or the spring, but at this very moment of recording, it's freezing. So yes, I do a lot of my work in a Snuggie. All right, so Forensic Science Unit 2 is basically covering all of the ins and outs of evidence. So yes, we are going to go in depth. This first little section is just kind of, as you can see here, what is it, the importance of it, and the two categories of evidence that we'll look at. But throughout this entire unit, we'll go through some of the specific evidence, how they use it, what they do with it, and so forth. So you guys are going to just be like inundated with evidence. All right, so let's kind of get started. What is it? Well, pretty easy, right? Evidence is information in a legal investigation. So obviously any investigation that's happening revolving around a crime scene is a legal investigation. So it's evidence that can be used in court, it can be used to prove innocence, guilty, whatever, all that good stuff, okay? So basically that's what we're looking at, okay? Pretty easy, right? Now, on to the two different categories, because there are two different categories, and we're going to break evidence down into itty bitty little tiny things, okay? So the two categories are direct and circumstantial, okay? So you have to think about it. Think about this big umbrella that evidence is under. And there's two types that go under there, direct and circumstantial. So direct evidence, first-hand observation, okay, such as eyewitness testimony, surveillance videos, police dashboard videos, or confession. That's direct evidence. Sometimes we think of direct evidence as like, oh, there was a gun there, that's direct. No, it's first-hand observation. So if a police ends up on the scene and they talk to a witness that has some testimony, surveillance videos, police dashboard videos, things that you are absolutely for sure of, okay? That's direct evidence. So something that you might have to swear about, a witness in court that has to take oath because they are direct evidence of what happened, okay? Again, surveillance videos, things that are you can't refute in any way, shape, or form. There's really, no kind of, oh yeah, that might have happened. No, it was on film, okay? That's direct evidence. Now, circumstantial is pretty much all the evidence that we think about typically, okay? The indirect evidence based on inference, not personal knowledge or observation. Doesn't mean that it's not good evidence. It's not, it's not like it's not concrete evidence, but we don't know yet until we do some more experiments, on that evidence, finding out exactly, kind of what happened and where and why and all the, questions that go around with that evidence. That's circumstantial. So kind of when we think of a crime scene and we think of all these numbers, the blood, the gun, the fingerprints, those are still not direct evidence. Those are circumstantial because more has to be kind of figured out as to figure out what's going on and what that evidence kind of points to, okay? So let's break down circumstantial evidence a little bit further. We have direct evidence. Physical evidence. That comes under circumstantial. Physical evidence is just material objects found at the scene of the crime. That could be a note, that could be a gun, that could be many different things, okay? That's physical evidence. Again, it's still circumstantial because it's not something that, an eyewitness, unless the eyewitness said, that person had a gun and it was that gun, okay? But this is still considered circumstantial. There's a lot of things that have to go, undergo with this type of physical evidence in order to figure out exactly who it came from and how it fits in, okay? So that's physical evidence. Now let's take physical evidence and break it down even further. Okay, so remember that umbrella. You have evidence, you have two kinds, direct, circumstantial. Then under circumstantial, now we have physical evidence. Under physical evidence, let's take this a little step further here, we have all these different types of evidence. Gross evidence. So when you think of gross, not like, ew, it just burped in my mouth a little bit. No. Gross as far as gross in size. It can be seen. So a gun is gross evidence. Blood stains are things that you might be able to see, so that would be gross. Now, if you can't see the blood stains, depending on the type of material they are, that would be trace evidence or possibly even latent evidence. So trace evidence is basically evidence in very small amounts, present in small amounts, hard to see with the naked eye. That could be a hair follicle, that could be blood if it's a very small amount. That could be just something that is very, very small, fingernail polish flakes from blah, blah, blah. You just never know what trace evidence could be, but it's very small amounts, hard to see with the naked eye. So sometimes there are, other tools that you have to use in order to find that, which we would call that then latent evidence. So latent evidence is evidence that can only be seen with special tools. Now hair, blood, those things can be seen with the naked eye, even if they're trace evidence. But sometimes, depending on, if there's a dark material and you can't see it with the naked eye, you might need special tools, maybe like infrared or UV light, to really point out what you're seeing. Okay, so that's latent evidence, things that can only be seen with the use of other tools. Okay, so a lot of times that's used at a crime scene investigation. We also have class evidence. Class evidence is evidence that's associated with a class of individual or objects. The example given, which I'm going to give to you guys as well, in your unit text is basically blood grouping. Because when we talk about class evidence, we can group people into type A blood, type AB blood, type B blood, and type O blood. Those are the 4 types. And I can actually zoom out a little bit on this. So you have, blood type A. And I could get into the blood types and talk endlessly, but you have these antigens of kind of markers that say, I'm type A blood. Type B blood has the B markers. Type AB has both of those markers, and type O blood has no markers. And scientifically, they can obviously do many different tests. It's really easy to actually type a blood. And they can classify, well, this person was type O blood in this crime scene, and this person, or this blood found on the knife is type AB blood. So, they can make inferences based on, this class evidence that they find, okay? All right, so moving on, the last type is the individualized evidence. Evidence that can be associated with only a specific person. So think about, just in like it talks about in your text, the greatest example of that is our lovely DNA, because DNA is very specific to each individual, okay? Nobody has the exact same DNA. So obviously this type of evidence is really important because it can be very individualized. So that's another type of evidence, okay? All right, now moving back, let's talk about the importance now, okay? Because the importance of evidence is pretty huge, right? So I'm going to go through each of these real quick. One of the main importances is identification, right? We want to know who this evidence belongs to, whether it's blood, a gun, hair, you name it. So a specific identification of a substance, such as the exact chemical nature of an accelerant in an arson investigation, that helps identify things. And that helps identify what the crime was, who the victim was, who the person that committed the crime. So all these different types of identification come from the evidence, okay? Comparison, a match between, for example, a tool mark found at a crime scene and a tool mark created in the lab by a suspect tool. So you can figure out, okay, let's compare this marking made at the crime scene versus if I take this in a crime lab and do the same kind of scrape, does that make the same tool mark? So you can figure out kind of what's going on, okay, comparison. Association is, can the evidence be associated with or excluded from an individual? So you can kind of figure out, okay, this doesn't really belong with this individual. So, we can kind of use that association. And then reconstruction. Can the evidence help reconstruct the sequence of events of the crime? And you'll see in just a moment that plays a really, really, really large role in this whole thing, okay, when we talk about evidence in the crime scene. So now what? What do we do with all this evidence? When we have all this evidence, that takes who knows how long. Depending on the crime scene, it could take a day, it could take 2 weeks to gather all of the evidence, okay? But what do we do with that? So we have the evidence from the criminalist. Now, other samples are taken by the medical examiner, sent to the forensic scientist for an analysis. So there's a lot of things that happen when we have the evidence from the crime scene. Now, a lot of that experimental kind of, those aspects from the forensic scientist, they really start to take place, and we start to analyze that evidence and really kind of figure out what's going to happen and what has happened in the past. So, and then, love my transitions, right? And then, the ultimate thing we want to do with all that evidence is we want to have the crime scene reconstruction. So we use all that evidence, we figure out exactly what happened, okay? And I mean, I say that, and you guys are like, yeah, right, you can't find out exactly what happened. Well, you'd be amazed at what these forensic scientists do with all of the stuff that the criminalists have gathered, and they can reconstruct that crime scene. So it's pretty cool to think that they take all of that stuff and they're able to kind of reenact what happened, which ultimately can tell us, who did what and who's guilty, who's, whatever, all that stuff. So putting it all together, I found one little quick video. I tried to find a good video that showed a little bit more about evidence. But here's kind of a little quick minute and a half of why evidence is so important and what it does for a crime scene.
On certain TV shows, crime scene investigators seem to do it all. They interview suspects and analyze clues. But that's not what real CSIs do. Senior investigator John Carey and his team do one thing and one thing only.
We are very specialized. Our job is specifically dealing with the evidence, going into the scene, collecting the evidence.
The work John and his crew perform creates the basis of the entire investigation. If they smudge a fingerprint or don't perfectly follow procedure, or if they contaminate the scene, the whole investigation can be thrown out of court, and a criminal could walk free. Thanks to TV, crime scene investigators have to deal with what they call the CSI effect when they testify in front of jurors.
If it doesn't match up with what somebody saw on a television program, which they now believe to be the way to conduct it, they may feel that we did not do our job.
So kind of interesting when you think about it, that, there are specific people that just gather evidence. Wouldn't that be a fun job? Oh, man. I'll think about that as a second career. No, but that video was kind of good to show the importance of what it takes to gather the evidence, how important it is to keep that evidence secure, do it in the proper method and manner. So anyways, there's a little bit on evidence. We'll get into some more details